If you would like to earn CPE credit for listening to the show, visit earmarkcpe.com/FPA. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Finally, if you enjoy listening to FP&A Today, please go to your podcast platform of choice, click the subscribe button, and leave a rating and review of the show. And now, on to the show.
From Data Rails, this is FP&A Today.
Welcome to FP&A Today. I'm your host, Glenn Hopper. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Bill Singh to the show. Bill is a seasoned corporate executive with over 15 years in the FP&A function of the gaming and hospitality industry. He is the vice president reporting to the EVP Finance at Genting Americas, with a dotted line to the CFO. Some of Bill's accomplishments include leading the company's FP&A function through a high-growth phase and shaping the company's strategic position from year to year. Bill holds a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration from the University of Nevada and is a CFA charter holder. The Genting Group is a global company founded in 1965 with destination resorts in Las Vegas, Bimini, Malaysia, Singapore, the Philippines, and the United Kingdom. Genting has more than 50 years of experience in the travel and leisure industry. It employs around 15,000 people and offers an unparalleled resort experience to more than 31 million visitors per year worldwide. We're thrilled to have Bill join us today to share his insights on financial planning and analysis. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be talking about the gaming industry. I think you're the first FP&A Today guest from the industry, so I'm really curious to hear about FP&A inside the industry. And I'm wondering, what initially drew you, two parts. What initially drew you to FP&A and what led you to the gaming industry?
I would say both of them were just random chance. I went through my undergrad program thinking that I would go work in investment management field. So think like a portfolio manager type person, somebody, or either in banking. Turns out that I graduated at the worst time economically, which was 2008 financial crisis. In a nutshell, I was not able to find a job in banking. I was in Nevada, so I had to go to plan B, which was that I needed some sort of a finance job somewhere. So I was in Nevada, and of course, all around me were casinos, and one of the casinos was hiring. So I went through the interview process. It wasn't very long, and I did not think that I was going to get the job, but they ended up offering me the job. I took it. I was very happy. So the role was in FP&A, and that's sort of how I got into it. As I went through a number of years of working in gaming lodging, I still wanted to go back to work on Wall Street. I then went to grad school of sorts, which is getting a certification. So I got the CFA, which was really geared towards my ultimate goal of going to work on Wall Street. I got it, and it still didn't happen. Nobody would still take me. And then I found a job at Genting in 2013. It came my way. My heart was still to go work on Wall Street. So I was like, maybe if I moved to New York, I would be able to maybe switch over to go work on Wall Street. And I had that thought in my head for a number of years that I want to eventually go there. It still wouldn't happen. Nobody would still take me. But eventually, after like 3 or 4 years of working with Genting, I realized that even though my mind was sort of focused on going to work on Wall Street, I was doing very good at what I was doing. So sometimes in life, opportunities find you. You just sometimes have great opportunities that are just like right in front of you. So I took a year off, 2 years off, and I was like, I'm going to focus exclusively on what my role means for the company that I work for and what is the expectation from me by people that surround me. And what I found was that for the most part, everybody's looking for facts. Everybody was looking for answers. And I put myself in their role, and I was like, if I was them, what would I be asking me the same questions that they're asking me? And the answer was a resounding yes, because a lot of those questions that they were answering were in the spirit of moving the business in the right direction. So that's when it hit me that I am kind of at the nexus of data and decision-making process. That is essential to not just gaming lodging, not just to Genting, but any business. This is the ultimate place you want to be if you want to use facts and data to make business decisions. On one hand, you have all the systems and technology. On the other hand, you have the executive team, and you're basically the bridge. You're the storyteller of what's happening. And quite frankly, I cannot imagine a better experience in learning how to run a business than being an FP&A. So that's pretty much.
Gotcha. And it's, there's a common theme. The more and more guests I have on the show and the more and more people I talk to in FP&A, there's something so appealing about consolidating all of this data and telling a story with it and being able to find the signal through all the noise and be the one who can interpret and explain that to people. It's almost professorial at times. It's like, you're doing the research and there's, using the analytical part of your brain, but then being able to convey that information is such an important part of the job. And I think maybe when people come into it, they don't realize how much storytelling is involved.
Exactly.
And thinking about how you've come up in the career, what do you think are the critical skills that you developed along the way, and that are the critical skills that anyone coming into FP&A needs to have? And maybe have you seen the role evolve in recent years since you've been doing this a while? I'm thinking about evolution in one, how the rest of the business perceives FP&A, and two, data, looking now at there's so much more data, and now we're using advanced analytics and automation. What do you think are the important skills for people to have through all this?
I would say that if you were to look at a professional who's, kind of in my capacity, usually it's somebody who's been around the block for 15 or so years. So kind of segmenting this experience in two parts would be to kind of look at maybe the first 10 years and then the rest of your career. In the first 10 years, I think some of the key skills that you will have will revolve a lot around data analysis. You are not the one who is going to be asking the question. You are basically trying to facilitate the answer. And a lot of the times you'll be dealing with multiple sources of information, some clean, some dirty. And of course, there'll always be a deadline because any business decision needs to have a timely sort of resolution. So you will find yourself in a place where you're basically wrangling with Microsoft Excel a lot. This is by far the application that I've used in my entire career. And to a large extent, my ability to get things done revolves around my ability to navigate through Microsoft Excel. I have constantly sought in my early years anyway, so I can get a 1% efficiency gain, 2% efficiency gain. So because I would find myself basically being tasked with questions that revolved analysis, and it needed to be done quick. It needed to be done effectively and comprehensively. So I would say knowledge of a application like Microsoft Excel is going to be paramount for you. The second piece is, because you'll have a lot of disparate sets of data coming in, checking your work for reasonability is always paramount. You always have to find some benchmark, some way to identify whether your whatever answer you're coming up with is somewhat reasonable. For example, if you're analyzing an expansion of a restaurant and you are taking the amount of traffic that's coming in from X to 2X, you want to really ask yourself, do you have the physical capacity to be able to service those kinds of customers? Or maybe you have the capacity, do you have the labor to be able to service that? Is there a ceiling on how much capacity you can have, because the volume that you're forecasting is going to translate into all of the metrics, revenues, expenses, and things of that nature. So one way you can kind of establish credibility as a young professional is to demonstrate that you're not just somebody who takes numbers and just dumps them in and puts them in pretty graphs, etc., but you're also looking at it from a business perspective to see if it makes sense. The third thing I would say is, when you're talking to your boss, don't just take the request that they're looking for. They might just go, I just need 3 rows and 4 columns, but try to ask them, what is the point of this? What question are you trying to answer with this? And a lot of the times people will be very willing to answer that question, because they'll immediately feel that you are really invested in answering the question, not so much just getting you the raw material that they need. It has really helped me in my early years is that it might be that your supervisor is asking you for X, but give them X plus 1. And that plus 1 is usually a follow-up question that they will ask you to do. But if you can demonstrate that you can answer X and plus 1, that really demonstrates that you are genuinely interested in learning about the business, and you're not just within the silos of numbers and just an application like Excel. So that would be, I would say, the first decade of your career. As you kind of span out after that, I think some of the big skill sets that you should have is, number one, salesmanship. A lot of the times you'll find yourself constantly selling ideas, rallying, galvanizing a team behind a mission. At some point you have a number of people that are working for you, and the best way you can get the best out of them is to truly sell them on the mission and why what you're asking them to do A, fits into a bigger picture, and B, it is going to have a material impact in whatever environment that you're in. I think that really galvanizes people, and we are in the business of intelligence. We're in the business of intelligence, whether it's technology, whether it's people, brain. So you want to be able to sell the mission. The other piece is, I would say, is problem solving skills. So you're going to be constantly tasked. People will come to you and they always ask you, I have this issue, and they're sometimes lost. So sometimes it's your responsibility to sort of dissect the problem into pieces and really try to take the noise out and really get to the bottom of the issue. One example that comes to mind, I have a little bit of interest in astrophysics. So in the 17th century, there was a philosopher named Kepler, Johannes Kepler. And what he was trying to figure out was the orbit of Mars. And people that came before him said that it is a perfect circle. When he would apply he would look at Mars, he would be like, it doesn't look like a perfect circle. It is not a perfect circle. It's kind of an ellipse, but he wouldn't figure out what kind of ellipse it was. So he goes on this path of charting Mars' orbit around the sun. The problem was, to chart any orbit, you need two stationary points, and then you draw a triangle, and mathematically you can do the orbit. The problem was that sun is a stationary object in the sky, but there's nothing else that's stationary. So it led him to this crazy problem where he could not figure out what the orbit was. And this is pre-computers, pre-everything. So he comes up with this very simple but ingenious idea. What he does is he's like, I know Mars is in the same spot every year, every revolution. So what he did was he basically instead started charting the path of Earth instead of Mars, because he would every year, let's say it was December 31st, we're going to make it up. He would look at Mars, he would look at the sun, and he would see where Earth is in relation to those two stationary points. He forced Mars to be stationary. And then he figured out Earth's orbit. And now that he had Earth's orbit and stationary sun, he could mathematically hold Earth constant and figure out the orbit of Mars. This is a perfect example of how, even to this day, you have to solve problems in an ingenious way that does not really require a lot of technology, etc., but just common sense of what matters and what doesn't matter and how you can hold things constant. Other than that, clarity of thinking. You have to, as a leader, you have to really demonstrate that you can think very clearly. In a world that is a bit of a mess, you have a problem at your hand. What is the first step? What's the second step? You become sort of a preacher. You preach the team. Let's do one, let's do two, and then we'll stop and we'll look at it, and we'll do 3, 4, 5. So to have that commitment and the clarity of thinking, I think, is key. And of course, all of this leads into risk taking. So you have all these skills: problem solving, clarity of thinking, salesmanship. It will encourage you to take more risk with things in your life, because you have some risk mitigating factors. So I mean, at the end of the day, I would say the first 10 years, technical skills. The next, for the rest, you just have to be able to sell well, solve problems well, and be able to take risk. Your last piece was, how is this industry evolved? I feel like since there's a lot more data that's available, and you have to at some point start embracing and look into technology that can help you embrace this information. And I'll talk about artificial intelligence, et cetera, in a minute here. But really, technology is a huge aspect of how we do our job. And there are pieces of technology out there that you have to almost purchase and put together in a way so that you have a comprehensive solution. So that's it.
Yeah, that's and great breakdown. And I love that in your breakdown of the skills, there's sort of the junior analyst, what you get good at, and you move up. And then when you move into management, what's required. And one thing that I thought was really interesting, because I always think of this from the other side, but when you said, as in those first 10 years, understanding the question behind the question, because I think about if I've been presenting to a board of directors or to investors or, senior management at times, whenever I present something, I'm always going to present at one level, but I know they're going to go 1 or 2 levels deeper. So I know whatever numbers I give them, I need to be ready to answer those 2 or 3 levels deeper. So if you have your team under you that is already thinking that way for you and understanding the question behind the question as the senior leader there, you've got that in your hip pocket and you're asking for a certain thing, maybe because that's how it needs to look in the board deck, but it's let me know what's behind it because the board's going to dig at it. So that is
exactly. And I think it also helps you sort of, you want to understand the business more, and you also get better over time. If you force yourself to figure out what is the question behind the question, and sure enough, if you do this over a decade or 15, 20 years, you will truly be able to go into a meeting or a discussion and really defend your position. And at the end of the day, that is very important in you coming across as a credible individual, because let's face it, there's money involved, there's reputations involved, and people seek leaders who can think clearly, who can think comprehensively. And I think this exercise is a great starting point for anybody.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I love in the Kepler example is perfect too, because we never have perfect data, and it's, well, this is the data we have. This is what I have to predict. How can I move around to get that based on what we have? What is some other piece of information that we have that I don't know the correlation yet, or whatever it is that I can tie to it? So that's a great story. All right. Well, I think what our listeners really want to hear about is the key metrics in the gaming industry. And I know you and I talked before the show about, how data-driven the industry is. So really curious to hear what are some of the metrics that you track that are exclusive to gaming, maybe that people outside wouldn't even think about when we're thinking about FP&A.
Yeah, so in gaming lodging, obviously gaming is a big, outside of Las Vegas, for example, and we're talking about US. Gaming is a very high margin business, and of course, lodging is an accessory. If you go to like markets like Las Vegas, you would see a little bit more lodging heavy business model, but outside of Vegas, it's very much gaming centric. And within gaming, the one metric that we really track is win per unit per day. So effectively speaking, let's say you open a casino someplace, maybe it's in Massachusetts or place where there has not been a casino. So you'll basically make a decision as to how many slot machines and table games you will host, and the amount of units you have is going to affect the size of your building. It's going to affect the kind of labor you have, and in some instances there are regulatory caps, etc., that you have to adhere to. So it's a very important metric. But as this business starts, as they open doors, they will start to work towards maximizing their revenue, which sometimes means you shrink the amount of units that you have, because if you shrink the amount of units you have, just because you have more units doesn't mean you're going to make more revenue. It's all demand driven. So sometimes you can cut your footprint by 20% and reduce expenses and then still be able to make the same revenue, because the revenue concentrates on the other 80%, effectively speaking. So over time, theoretically, every gaming company has maximized the amount of units that they need to maximize revenue. So when you look across the US or across a market, the win per unit per day is a pretty good barometer of what the spending propensity is for the customers, and at the same time, the competitive forces, et cetera. So if you're looking at across the industry, gaming industry, different segments, if you want to do apples to apples comparisons, I think win per unit per day is a fairly good metric to look at. The other item that we track is basically our hold. It's a lot of people think that casinos make a ton of money. We are taking all of your $100 bills, etc. No, that's not the case. We are effectively providing you with a gambling experience, and there's you and there's another person sitting next to you, and sometimes you are playing against the house, but the house is effectively taking a cut from both of your action, and sometimes we just give a lot of your cash to them or them to you. You feel like winning today and losing tomorrow and winning today, and that's kind of part of the experience. We typically on slot machines, for every dollar that is bets, the $100 that are bet, we keep about $9 or something. So the rest of it pretty much gets shuffled amongst people on the floor. So there's that. And of course, we talked about lodging side of things. On lodging side, it is, the metrics are very much similar to other non-gaming but lodging businesses. So your occupancy, your ADR, your revenue per available room, your cost of turning a room, those are some of the key metrics that we track. Occupancy being effectively, because that is a very important metric, because that you can translate that into the number of people that are in the house, and pretty much everything that happens at your business is going to be governed in some way by the customers that are in the hotel. So I would say those are the three main metrics.
That's interesting. And I'm thinking now, so obviously occupancy drives everything because that's the base of the model, but I'm picturing the different histograms between, okay, these are our guests that come, and here's the distribution of what they spend gambling, and then here's the distribution of what they spend on shows, meals, and everything. You've got sort of your median customer where you take the average of everything and put it in there, but then you've got your high rollers who are doing a different thing. You've got some people who come and don't even walk up to a slot machine or table. They're just there to see the shows or whatever. And it's just, I could see those models being pretty interesting when you try to put all the factors in and
exactly. So I mean, at the end of the day, you start with kind of a high level projection of who's coming. Right. And to your point, you will see they fall on a spectrum from high to mid to low. And there are certain parts of the business that are not really, they aren't so sensitive to high, mid, low, for example, food and beverage. Right. But then you could have other parts of the business, like in our case, we throw parties for our casino customers. And that obviously is not driven by the entire occupancy of the hotel that's associated with the casino, but a subsegment of it. But then we have subsegments of occupancy also that kind of give us what the transient business is like, what the group business is like, what the casino business is like. So either we can take all of them together and use those metrics to make forecasts, or we can use subsets. So for group business, that drives a certain element of our business. A transient might affect everything. And then gaming centric, more casino affects just the casino.
As a guest at a casino, when I go in, I think roulette's a lot of fun, but I know my odds aren't great there. But if I hit, I get the 36-1 or whatever, I'm doing all this calculus in my head, and it's like, well, if I want to play for a long time, I should just sit down and play blackjack or enter a poker tournament or whatever it is that I'm doing. But I'm thinking, with your metrics, I mean, if gaming to the consumer, it's all about the odds, and certainly on the casino owner side as well. But how much do the odds and statistics from each game type, each table, we have this many mahjong tables versus, or whatever the tables you have set up there, how much do the odds and statistics factor into your financial modeling from different stats from the revenue generators and lines of business from rooms, entertainment, gaming, et cetera?
So the odds do vary by effectively segments of our product effectively. So, the best way I can give you an analogy is if you walk into Costco, right? Jewelry is right at the front. It's the most highest margin business. You might have tech right after that, and you might have clothes after that. You might have some kitchen appliances, and all the way in the back is your soda and milk. So in our line of business, it's a very similar setup also. So you'll have basically certain areas that are more higher end, like our higher end rooms where you can gamble. Obviously, the odds of winning are lower, but then we compensate that with higher quality of service, right? So we have to have an offsetting effect. So effectively, odds of winning are lower, but it is an exclusive room where you can have a great experience. But on the other hand, we could have some video poker games all the way in the back by the bar. They aren't very pretty, but the odds of winning are a lot higher there. So they're usually holding at about 2 to 3%, 4%, something like that. So we look at our business, we look at the traffic flows, and then we put our product in tandem with how the traffic flows would be to maximize revenue effectively.
Gotcha. And I'm asking this sort of tongue in cheek, but maybe sort of not. I'm going to be speaking at a conference in Vegas later on this year, and I think I've got somebody from the inside of a casino, and I'm thinking, man, you see casinos, you see the numbers from casinos all around the world, and with the data you have with every game, every table, and it's like, what's some insider advice that you might be able to give to me before I head to Vegas next time?
So let me kind of explain to you what gaming business is, right? In a nutshell, I think I may have to quote Steve Wynn on this. When you enter a gaming facility, and if you are a reasonably decent guest that does come from time to time and spends a certain level, a lot of the times what you'll find is most of everything is complimentary or heavily discounted. But the only thing that's not complimentary is gaming. It's the casino floor. So the business that we are in is you walk in and you're going to get a lot of stuff for free, and then we invite you to the casino floor to gamble. Now, on your first trip, you may not lose anything. You may walk away with money. So now you're looking back at this experience and you're like, I got everything for free. And when I played, I actually won. That is a great feeling of victory. You walk away with money, but the next time we're keeping track of all of it. So because at the end of the day, all the free stuff you're getting has to be paid for in some ways. But what humans do is we tend to associate more with the positive experiences, less with the negative experiences. But at the end of the day, we are just a business, and all we do is effectively over time, we are looking at a return on investment on you. And once you do the math, effectively what you've done is you've paid for everything that you've gotten for free, and then you give us a little bit of a profit margin. In return, you get this awesome experience. The other thing I can tell you is that don't play the games that are like right by the door. Yes, if there's a game out there that looks very nice and flashy, that is right by the door, that's the one that will have the least amount of odds for success. The other thing that is it's a huge misconception is that the lower denomination you play, the longer the game is going to last. So like how else, if you're playing penny machines versus $5 machines, the penny machines have lower odds of winning than $5 machines. Now, not everybody's comfortable doing $5 bets, but generally speaking, if you're looking at a dollar machine and a penny machine, understand that all else equal, your money will not last very long on the penny machine, but if you go higher in denominations, it will. And of course, the third thing I would tell you is that unfortunately, you cannot win from the house. There's people like me who are constantly doing math on everything, and that's all we do all day long. And just expect this to be fun experience that actually is in vogue right now across the United States. Gaming is doing very well. We serve you really well. We'll give you great service. You'll basically pay the bill on the casino floor. There you go.
That's great. I mean, and truthfully, everybody, you have to fundamentally understand that, because no business is going to sell a product for less than it costs them to make it. So gaming is the same way. This wouldn't exist if people were coming here and winning all of our money. It wouldn't be a casino that was open very long. The other thing I thought about when you talked about the games close to the door, I was thinking about that movie Rain Man, where he goes and he's counting cards into a 6-deck shoot or whatever. But then and I don't know if you've seen the movie, but when he's walking out, the guy that was Dustin Hoffman's character is caught by this. It's the big wheel where they just spin and you're guessing what number the wheel's going to land on, and started losing money on the wheel. But that's exactly the kind of game in Vegas Vacation, when Chevy Chase goes to the casino, that is like the guys guess how many fingers I'm holding up behind my back kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
So I appreciate the insight there, and I think that's great for our listeners to hear. I guess getting back to the more practical and business side, I know with the level of the budgeting you do at Genting Americas, you led the construction of and presentation of the budget for the operating side and the capital budget for all divisions. That had to be a massive undertaking to do for the past 10 years. I'd love to hear kind of the challenges and strategy as you managed putting together something like this for so long.
Yeah, it is definitely challenging. It's a funny anecdote. My boss's wife, when he was in my shoes, he's now overseeing my department, but used to be in my shoes, and his wife would jokingly call herself a budget widow. Because
I think a lot of us can relate. Yeah.
For 3-4 months during the summer. There's a cost and there's a benefit to this experience. The cost, obviously, is that you're budgeting for an entire company. You're budgeting down to a line level detail, GL by GL level detail. So all else equal, it takes time. And for a lot of us, it's usually the summertime, occupational hazard, if you want to call it. But the major upside is that there is no better way to learn about the business than to budget for every tentacle of the business, line by line. And if you do this for 10 years for a company, I'm very blessed that I've had this experience of doing the budget for Genting for 10 years. You really not only understand where the tentacles are, what does gaming mean to us in division A versus B versus C, but also the interplay of gaming and lodging. For example, we have a property that's in New York City where lodging isn't really tied to gaming. We are right next to JFK Airport, and a lot of lodging is driven by the airport. It doesn't really have a huge, strong connection to gaming. Whereas if you go upstate, we have a resort that is very much 70-80%. So you see this interplay among divisions, and they vary from one to another. And I also think that as a company matures, and not everybody has the benefit of doing budgets for a decade, but you see the evolution at a very granular level of how a business matures. So I think that this is the best MBA you can get in your life, is to be able to do a budget for an entire company, come up with a theoretical idea of what the next year is going to be, and then go through the rigor of selling that budget to the CFO and the board, and do it over and over and over and over again. And if you do this over and over again long enough time, you understand how your boss thinks. You understand how the top levels of the management team think. And that gives you very key information about how you can participate more in the problem solving exercise if you have an idea of the framework of how they think. And if by doing this over and over again, I think it really, really sort of helps you. The challenge in budgeting, I would say, and we really have cracked this in the last year or so, is the technology that is associated with budgeting. So in a nutshell, you have hundreds of people that are involved in the budget process. The question really is how do you, and it's an interactive process. And the question really is how do you go about going back and forth with them and soliciting information and making adjustments? What's nice about it is that back in the day it was Excel spreadsheet out, Excel spreadsheet in, and the volume was just overwhelming. But now we just have like one tool where we can make all of these adjustments and see basically how our budget really gets scoped. So I think this is why I was talking about earlier about technology. As you think about doing a good job in FP&A, you have to have one foot in the technology world and to see what are the latest developments in technology, and they're really material. Like if you get it right, you'll still work a lot of hours, but you will do the right kind of work as opposed to the wrong kind of work. So
FP&A Today is brought to you by DataRails, the world's #1 FP&A solution. DataRails is the artificial intelligence-powered financial planning and analysis platform built for Excel users. That's right, you can stay in Excel. But instead of facing hell for every budget, month-end close, or forecast, you can enjoy a paradise of data consolidation, advanced visualization, reporting, and AI capabilities. Plus game-changing insights giving you instant answers and your story created in seconds. Find out why more than 1,000 finance teams use DataRails to uncover their company's real story. Don't replace Excel, embrace Excel. Learn more at datarails.com. As you went through the process of putting this budget together, I'm sure you've gotten better at it each year as technology's gotten better, as you've learned more. What would you say that you've learned in this are some things that have maybe made you better at it, made you more efficient at it, made it easier over the year, and sort of what insights you've learned for other people who are maybe just starting, maybe doing their annual budget for the first time, maybe some best practices?
Sure. I mean, I would say that between each budget cycle, there is 12 months, roughly speaking, depending on when you start and when you end. And during those 12 months, take the time to understand the business. And when I was young, and I always kind of questioned why we needed to meet every month and do an actual budget variance analysis. It's a very long meeting, and involves a lot of people, etc. But as I have gotten more seasoned, looking at your financial statements, which is really your report card, every single month is very important, because you start by having a hypothesis of how the year was going to go, and then reality takes over. It never turns out the way you thought it would be. And it's important for you to take the time and study what you missed. If what happened was different than what you had projected, how much of that is macroeconomic factors that you wouldn't have been able to forecast anyway? And how much of that was because your model wasn't as tight as it needed to be? I'll give you a perfect example. We have a resort where we are trying to drive a lot of casino customers, a lot more this year than we did last year. In our budget process, one of the items that I missed was that I thought that as we grew customers at the resort, the spend per customer on food and beverage, etc., would stay exactly the same. So reality is that as you go for more fish, you're going to go down the tiers as far as the kind of customers you're getting, and you go basically lower on their spend tiers, and you're going to get more spend. So that would be a perfect example of how you budgeted X, but it did not happen. That's very important information. And you can't go through that analysis a month before the budget process starts. You have to do it every single month. And you have to have a framework of how you take this information in and how you're going to document it and how you're going to evolve it. So I would say that financial reviews are very important. They also help you, understand your business a lot better, because as FP&A team, theoretically, you should be prepared with a commentary for a division during the financial reviews. You should start by saying, this is what I think happened. And then you have the president sitting right next to you, and they may agree with you on everything, or they may agree with you on 80%, and they may like the other 20%. You kind of have it off, but it's close, etc. But that iterative process of talking to the experts that are in the field every single month across the entire organization is worth the time, I would say. That would make your budget process a lot better, and you would just have muscle memory as to how Division A is performing, B and C and D. Other than that, I think if you lean into more analysis, and I know financial planning analysis, one analysis is in the title, but anytime you're asked to answer a question, again, look for the question behind the question, lean in heavily, see what information is out there that may not be sitting in a fancy business intelligence tool that could actually be a great addition to it. And have the Microsoft Excel skills to be able to take that dirty data, clean it up, and be able to, tell a story. So as far as put yourself in the position where you're forced to tell a story. Put yourself in a position where you're forced to explain something complicated, because at the end of the day, all those analyses culminate into a strategy that needs to be baked into the budget as part of your projection. So do this, don't do this. Do more of this, don't do any of this. This needs to be baked into the budget process. So the more you know, in January, found one thing, February found one thing, March, April, then you have to bake this into the budget process. And that's how you truly effectively set performance targets. So don't waste your year, I guess, is the point.
That's a great point. And I think about, the first year you do a budget, that you've got your historical financials, and hopefully you have a clean chart of accounts and you've got all the data that you need, but you don't have that familiarity with the data, so that you've got your data that you're going to use to start with, you've got your drivers for the budget, and then you have your assumptions. But those assumptions, they're built out on historical, but when you're green, it's hard to know what those assumptions are going to be. But you mentioned, you're sitting next to the president. President's been doing it a while. They probably have a pretty good idea of what kind of assumptions to make. But a lot of times, people have been in this business and they have hunches that are great, but they've been in the business and they weren't it wasn't data-driven decision making. It was just anecdotally, I know because I've been doing this a long time and I get it. So data has gotten more and more important. And I think about what we all struggle with now is, depending on where our company is and kind of on the data maturity scale, the challenge of that data quality and data management. As you've gone through over the years with the budgeting, and I think you get a better understanding, you sort of can better define your data when you are doing those monthly variance to budget analyses, because it makes you dig in and it makes you think, maybe we're not coding this to the right account, so it's skewing the number. We need to make changes through the year, and then you kind of clean it up through the work. Just in general, have you found some strategies that you like that are good ways to ensure kind of accuracy and integrity of the financial data? And then also, it's not just finance. You have to work with cross-functional teams on the data governance. How do you navigate that?
I think in a nutshell, you as an organization, you have to have one source of truth. And it's never going to be 100%, but you all have to agree on what that source of truth is, and then invest resources on that. That's how in a nutshell, you get high quality information. With Genting, what we are doing is we have a data warehouse. I know it's a term that gets thrown around all the time, but we have effectively, this is a very common problem that's in all gaming lodging businesses is you have disparate systems that don't talk to each other. Each system is meant to do its job. A hotel system is meant to sell the hotel, to book a room. A gaming system is meant to run a slot machine. Unfortunately, that's where the resources go, is the front end of the tool. The back end of the tool is that never really quite analytics, conducive to analytics. So what we have done is we have brought all of this information into a central repository, and we have people that are dedicated to doing nothing but moving information from all the disparate system into a central location. And then, of course, there's an element of finance that is really like the finance wing of FP&A. So there's a data wing and there's a finance wing. The finance wing is kind of checks and balances on the data side, because they're basically running a high level report to ensure that the data that's coming in is accurate. In a nutshell, what I find is that a lot of the times you have a lot of analysts that are always pulling information directly from different systems, and then they struggle in combining it all together. And usually they will do this under the stress of a deadline, which never leads to a good product. What needs to happen is someone in a leadership capacity needs to define what data is important, where does it lie, and hire a skill set that can get that data in front of you in a comprehensive way, in an automated way. And then effectively you kind of define how this data needs to be grouped. I mean, you may not need to see at level 5. You may just want to see at level 3. You define sort of the groupings, and then basically have your analyst check the top level and be like, does that high level number make sense? And of course, this has to become muscle memory. The data people are getting better and better at pulling information on a routine basis. The analysts are getting better and better at checking the accuracy of data. And then once it's there, then that's it. And then, of course, you have a BI tool that basically can disseminate this information back to the organization in a very clean format. But I think where companies fail is they don't sub-segment the responsibility of getting information to people who are experts at just getting information and people who are experts at consuming this information. And what we've done is we've kind of segmented it a bit more. So more specialization, we have more information, it's more coming in more timely. Obviously, it takes money and resources, but the end result is usually worth it.
You just kind of outlined what we're all dealing with right now. And I do think it's more important than ever for us to get a handle on this data and really understand all of our KPIs, our metrics, where the data is coming from, what our source of truth is, because I think we're about to be, if we're not already there, depending on where the company is with data maturity and where they are with their finance tech stack. But we're going to start seeing more and more influence of AI and being able to use, I think it's going to be built into the tools that we're already using. They're going to start incorporating more AI that makes it sort of more democratized. So you don't have to be engineers. I don't know. Are you seeing that? And what are you if you're reading the tea leaves right now, what, from the tech side, that what you're using or from the software, what do you see the next 5-10 years? How do you see FP&A evolving?
In a nutshell, I think artificial intelligence will help us get to the answer faster. Let me give you an example. I have chefs or executive chefs, people that are very good at running the kitchens at our restaurants. They're not as good as I am in analyzing data, because this is what I do. I would suck at their job, but I might be better at sort of analyzing numbers. Sometimes there's a gap between FP&A and the operators, where the FP&A team has the skill set they're more tech savvy. So they're going to build, if they have to get their questions answered, which are very similar to the questions that the operators are asking, they might have technological tools that they can relate to more, just either by muscle memory or by training or whatever, than people that are in the field can, because they're actually running the business. They're not in front of the computer all the time. What would be great is if our executive chef can just type into a chat bot, what was my sales for the month of, we're in April. What were my sales last April for our high-end steakhouse? What was the average cover? What was the last 3 months run rate of, what percentage of my business was food? Basically, there's data that's available. He or she is out in the field battling it. And if they just have the ability to just go, what was I doing last month, same month last year, and how am I pacing this month? It gives them an idea. If they're saying, what were my sales, 24 days into April last year, it was 100,000. This year, it's 80,000. The question really is it food I'm selling less? Is it beverage I'm selling less, etc.? So you could be actually in the field and be able to get these questions answered without having to sit down, download data, etc. That, again, FP&A can do because that's what they do all the time. But a lot of the times in our business, it's the operators that are delivering the service that are trying to do the best they can. But at the same time, they don't have the time to sit down in front of a computer and do this. So a lot of this will, I hope, that migrates over to a phone, and it is just a conversation with a chatbot, just like it would be a conversation between them and me. There's that. The other thing I just want to quickly add is that even at sort of our level, at the end of the day, what we are looking for as business owners is cause and effect relationship. We have certain independent variables. You could have a resort in the Bahamas that gets 2,000 people dumped onto the island because a ship just docked, right? What do these people really do? How do they affect your retail side of business? How do they affect your food and beverage side of business? Is there a certain aspect of your food and beverage that gets more hit by the traffic than the other? Going back to our example of slot machines, the ones by the door odds are going to be low. So if we understood, and a lot of these correlations are pretty much pre-established theories in mathematics, whether it's regression analysis and things of that nature. But is there a tool that could sit between someone like me and the data and give me a starting point, as opposed to me going column independent variable, 4 columns dependent variables, which one has the most sensitivity? Maybe that one dependent variable affects the other dependent variable. You know what I'm saying? Like if I sell more at bar 1, which is affected by the number of people I have on the island, what does that affect bar 2? If I have intel into how my business is affected by macroeconomic forces, it gives me more tools to tactically adjust small things. Maybe I want to charge more at a bar that is very close to the port, that sort of thing. It is a time-consuming process for us to be able to do that. And a lot of this knowledge of correlations is centered around like PhDs, effectively, people who do nothing but quant work. But a lot of that quant work that gets done is pre-established theories. You're not reinventing regression analysis. It's been, somebody won the Nobel Prize on that 30 years ago. But an AI tool can take all of that information in, take your data, and give you a good starting point. I think those are the two main areas of opportunity with AI that I can think of.
Everything you just mentioned, of course, FP&A, we could do that for years if you can write Python, if you can write a SQL query. Exactly. And if so what AI is going to do, generative AI in particular, because of the conversational nature of it, I see it as, so we've talked about democratization of data for years, but now we're talking about democratization of data science. Mm-hmm. Because now if I don't, I think there's going to be the requirement that, you understand what a correlation matrix is and that you understand dependent and independent variables and all that. But with that level, you don't have to then go become a half-ass coder where you are, know a little bit like me, a little bit of Python to be dangerous, but more, enough to break things probably more likely than not. So, yeah. I think we could talk about this all day, but we're getting to the segment of the show. It's I've got to come up with a catchy name for it, but it's kind of the getting to know you phase of the show, because when we have guests on, we always do like to remind our listeners that, hey, we might be FP&A geeks, but we're also all humans here. So one question we love to ask everybody is, what's something that not many people know about you? Maybe maybe it's something we could find out if we Googled you, or maybe it's something that hasn't made it to the internet. Any exciting stories or tales or tidbits of information?
I am always on a quest to learn. Learning is very exciting to me. And recently I've been trying to think, what is it that I can learn that is very different from analytics and science? And it's funny. Last year I went to do a little keynote speech on BI in Boston, and the CFO of School of Rock was there to do the same thing. And I look at him, and it kind of took me back to my middle school years, and I used to play drums when I was in middle school. So I talked to him after the keynote speech, and he's like, you know what, Bill, there's a School of Rock school in right by where you live, and I was like, that's interesting. I recently, about 5 or so months ago, I went in just to do a trial class, and I was absolutely hooked on playing drums. I listen to a lot of music, and the thing that is amazing is transcribing what you hear onto paper. Because in order for you to learn how to play drums, you have to listen to somebody already playing drums, write it down, and then practice it over and over again. And the art of writing the music down, transcribing it, when does the snare drum hit? When does the kick drum hit? What kind of beat is it? What is the difference between a hip hop beat and a soca beat? 4 notes, 8 notes, 32 notes. I feel that so there are times that I'll be like flying to Miami or something, and I'm listening to the song, and I'm actually just counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Like, I actually can do that just about anywhere. And quite frankly, when you're learning how to play drums, you don't even need a drum set to do that at the very beginning, because it is all just, you know it's basically, you can do this you can be sitting on an airplane seat, and you could be doing a kick drum with your right foot. You can be doing a hi-hat with your left hand. And when you could do that for an hour on an airplane, but when you come back, you'll actually find that you're playing drums better. So it is something that I love music. And transcribing music onto notes is something that is very different than making sense of numbers. I also think one thing that is very different compared to my day job is, in my day job, the harder I think, the better I do. In drums, the less you think, the better you play. And my coach always tells me, he's like, when you are playing drums at your peak, you might as well be having a chat with the guy next to you, or be sitting in the audience, and your body will just play the drums that way it needs to be played. So it's a very relaxing and happy and unifying kind of feeling, because you're playing. I haven't gotten to a band level yet, but that's one thing that I've been doing for the last 6 or so months that I don't think everybody knows about. I actually have a drum set right. You probably can't see it. You can see it right there a little bit. It's an electronic drum set. So I work here, and if I need 5 minute relaxation, I play a note there. There you go.
That's great. Neural pathways are being created now that are using different parts of your brain, and it's a brain plasticity. And I think the more you can kind of expand and broaden those pathways, I mean, I'm sure it has, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but there have to be ways that it's impacting the way you think and how you do your job.
100%. When you think about a drummer is effectively, they call it the metronome of the stage. Effectively, the drummer is setting the tempo of the song. If the drummer slows down, everybody else slows down. So you are kind of the leading force when it comes to a song that is being played on the stage. And in some ways, you are in the spotlight, and you have the leading responsibility. You are the leader, and in some ways, in FP&A, there has to be a leader. There has to be somebody who is willing to lead the way, and it instills confidence. You're on the stage. You are performing against a group of people. I feel like life is a stage. Even in running a business, you'll be put in the spotlight, you'll be given resources, and you have to perform and deliver. And yes, it takes practice, it takes repetition, muscle memory. I see a lot of parallels, except for the fact that I don't have to use my brain when I'm playing drums. I can turn it off. A lot of practice, but not a lot of thinking.
Yeah. One more note. I was at that event you were talking about. Jack McCullough and I have done quite a few events together. I think I actually spoke at that one too. And I did meet, was it John? I can't remember. It's the guy from School of Rock. Was he?
It's with an A, yes.
Yeah. So, great event though. So I'm surprised our paths didn't cross there. But other question we have to ask everybody, and we'll be asking this question in 50 years. I won't. Whoever takes over the show from me. Hopefully, I'm sipping a margarita at one of your resorts full time in 50 years. But this question we have to ask everyone, or not that we have to ask. We're curious, and occasionally I will hear something that I didn't know before, so I'm still learning from it. Tell me, what is your favorite Excel function?
The one that I use a lot is index match. And I'll tell you the reasons why I really like it. And I'm a bit of an engineer too, just by because I get a kick out of engineering. So I try to simplify the programming aspect of models as much as I can, because if I can minimize the amount of programming or the processing power a model can take, I can actually add more wings of that model. I can do more scenarios, because at the end of the day, you have everything is limited, including the resources on your computer. What index match does is, as opposed to, let's say, a SUMIF has to run through the entire table to find a number. So let's say you have a table that's 1,000 rows long, and the answer is in row 500. And when you do a SUMIF, it has to go through 500. It'll find 500, and then it'll memorize 500, and then 550. It'll go through the entire table to find the answer, even though it can just stop at 500. My argument would be, in most cases, the table that you're using should never have one thing appearing more than once, because in that case, you have way too much detail than you actually need to answer the question, which is another great thing about modeling. You don't have more data than you need, because then that robs you of processing power. But if you have a certain level of detail, each number should be appearing once. And then index match, basically what it does is that once it finds that number, it stops thinking. It actually stops. It'll find the first number and it'll stop thinking. And there's some rare instances where you would have to do a stop match, but that's where you pay attention to all these little things. Index match could be index match, so it's a three-dimensional.
Yeah. So I love that answer, though, because I love the engineering mindset with it. It's how can we reduce compute? What is the most efficient here? It's not just so you really are you're thinking on a whole different dimension there, because normally it's just I'm hacking away at it. For most of us, it's I'm just hacking away at Excel. I know this works. I'll just, hit enter and let it run and do it. But with the engineering mindset, you were saying.
And also remember, when you augment, say, Microsoft Excel with other business intelligence tools, one of the beautiful things about these BI tools is you can get level 5 detail, level 4 detail, level 3, 2, 1. It's all just a click. And you can be assured that you just want, whatever detail you get, it has, because we've checked the entire data set and it's accurate. You can just pull level 3 detail, bring it into Excel, but don't stop there. Keep going. Always think about how, again, this goes back to my quest for just always finding little bits and pieces to kind of improve my craft. So I'm always looking for a way to get to the answer with the least amount of resources, because then I can answer that same question. I can look at the same problem in many different ways. There comes a point where there's a cap as to how many different ways you can look at it, because the compute power runs out. But that's not to say you can't be smart about how you're going through every single one of those steps.
This has been a fascinating conversation, and I'm sure for our listeners as well. If any of our listeners wanted to connect with you and learn more about you and your work, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I would say, we're all on LinkedIn. I post a lot of the content just like this on LinkedIn, and that is, send me an invite. I will not refuse it.
Bill, thanks again for coming on. Really enjoyed the show.
Thank you very much, Glenn. I appreciate the time, and looking forward to talking to you more at some point in the future.